Have you done a podcast before?
No, never. It's actually my dream to be on a podcast.
Your dream?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
No pressure.
Oh, no, that's too much pressure. You see, the pressure's usually supposed to be on you. Now you flip that. The pressure's now on me, and I'm like, oh, fuck. Welcome back to Radio Juxtapoz, the podcast exploring the contemporary art world with those that make it. My name's Doug Gillen, and today I'm excited to be sitting down with rising star Hannah Wilson. Thank you once again for joining us here at Radio Juxtapoz. It feels really good to be back in full swing with the new season of episodes, and I really like this rhythm that we've got going at the moment, especially when the rest of the art world seems relatively quiet. I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today's episode. Originally from the city of Milton Keynes in England, Hannah joins me today over Zoom in their flat in Glasgow, Scotland, which I think probably makes this the closest we've come to having a Scottish guest on the podcast. To any Scottish listeners at the moment, I promise I am trying to sort that out. Having completed their Masters at the Glasgow School of Art in 2022, Hannah switched up their tea and crumpets for iron brew and haggis rolls, and has continued to pursue artistic dreams from there. Hannah's debut US solo exhibition, Number One Fan, ran back at the start of the summer this year at the Steve Turner Gallery in LA. Taking Martin Scorsese's 1982 film The King of Comedy as inspiration, the collection of oil paintings was comprised largely of the backs of the leading characters' heads. Closer inspection of the illustrative, almost graphic appearance of the works revealed thick application of the oils and textured strokes from the hand of a well-informed painter. Aside from the power suits and coiffed waves, I think it's fair to say that Hannah has as much of a love of film as they do painting, and continues this journey of self-discovery through the characters. Together we're going to go right down the rabbit hole of this love of film, why The King of Comedy was the right one to choose to debut a solo US show, and we're going to talk about a lot more. If you do enjoy this episode, let us know over on the socials, subscribe wherever you happen to be listening in from so you never miss a drop. Let's get into it right here, right now with Hannah Wilson on Radio Juxtapoz. What was it about being on a podcast? It's like the long form conversation.
I love that. That's basically all the films I like. I just like it. Though, to be fair, the only podcast I really listen to is Dungeons and Dragons ones. So
wow,
this may not be. This probably
I'm
won't
gonna
be
put my
that.
cards on the table right now and say that is a topic I'm going to be very, very novice on. Oh, so are you into Dungeons and Dragons? Is that a thing?
I am, but I'm mainly an observer.
Okay, just lurking in the periphery.
Yeah, it's actually my New Year's resolution this year was to be a dungeon master, but it has gotten to almost the end of July and I've made no progress on that. So this is further accountability for me.
So just since we're here, since we're doing it, what the fuck is a dungeon master?
They're the person who runs it. They're the boss. So they've got all the sheets. They're the ones that are like, you've entered the cave and like they know where everything in the cave is, and then you get to do all the voices for all the characters if you're into that sort of thing, which I am.
Is it a sex thing?
It can be.
I don't know if that was a shit question or not. You enter the cave and you do the voices. I'm like, I didn't think it was a sex thing, but maybe it is.
It can be, but so could anything.
Yeah, everything's a sex thing if you're brave enough.
Yeah.
A shadow grows on the wall behind you, swallowing you in darkness. It is almost here. What is it?
What if it's the Demogorgon?
I'm gonna start. I actually wrote down for one of the very few times I've done this, and I'm gonna see. I was gonna try and just see if I could deliver it, but I'm fucking terrible at that.
So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest King of Comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
Hannah Wilson, thanks for joining us today. Number One Fan, your latest solo exhibition at Steve Turner Gallery in LA saw you pull focus on two characters from Martin Scorsese's 1982 film, The King of Comedy. which draws on the idea of celebrity worship in 20th century media culture. Was this made with the idea of showing in LA, and what specifically drew you to these characters?
I can't believe you thought of that right off the top of your head. That's crazy. Well, you know what?
I was like, I never fucking write that stuff. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to take a swing at it.
It's a good question. Well, the short answer is no. So I knew that I wanted to, I was really excited about the show. So I was like, I need to figure out, because the bodies of work that I make usually kind of always come together very organically, but it's usually like a domino will go and then the rest will just come in. But it was New Year's Day this year. I watched King of Comedy for the first time, and I was just like, oh my God, like I loved it so much. And it's just like the first time I think ever that for a show I was like, okay, it's all going to be about this. So
did you know immediately that was going to be, this has to be an exhibition based around this?
Yeah, because it was just so rich. I love films where the characters are really insufferable, and he is just so like, he's so desperate, and then he's got the like this suit.
And what I'm thinking as I'm sitting here now, well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance. You know what I mean?
What I loved about Jerry as well is he's just like this really monumental, like he's this mountain of a guy. He's so big. And it did come into my mind that it's a very, like, even though the film's set in New York, it would make sense. It made sense for LA.
You don't just walk onto a network show without experience. Now, I know it's an old hackneyed expression, but it happens to be the truth. You got to start at the bottom.
I know, that's where I am, at the bottom.
That's a perfect place to start.
So that was just like a happy coincidence. The desperation in Jerry, not Jerry, he's quite desperate as well, but in Rupert. And I think it kind of, as an artist, it felt like, because the whole plot is him, like, he wants to be a stand-up comedian so bad, and he's willing to like do anything, and he's just like, like scratching at like the windows or whatever. And you do kind of, saw some kind of, a lot of my work is kind of like self-portraiture when you think about it a little bit too much. And I was like, God, like, is this me? Like, I want to be an artist so bad. And, you know, would I show up at Jerry's lake house unannounced? I don't know. Maybe I would.
His name is Rupert Pupkin. He lives in a world of make-believe.
Do you have that self-deprecation? I mean, you're an artist showing and you're making work for a gallery in LA.
I know, which is amazing. And that is also, it's kind of, I like to think everyone gets it. It's not just me, but like that imposter syndrome as well. So you will kind of...
Yeah, you're not alone there.
Yeah, you'll overthink, or you'll kind of, the show of it, I guess, which is what I was interested in with Rupert. He doesn't take anything in. He doesn't listen. When
you are putting together a show based on something like a film, quite exclusively, is that context important for you in the environment? Once you look at your work hung up in a show, is it important that we know where these men come from, who these men are in this case? So generally, no. So because I'm quite conscious that I pull from films for the context of the work, or that is the trigger point that gets, you know, things moving, and it will be feeding into the work. But I don't want to be making paintings which are about a film. Like they're from the film, but they're not about it. What's the difference between these two then? I think just to, you know, I don't want it to be a narrative, I guess. So I don't want people to be, I mean, people can do what they like, but I'm not trying to describe the film. I mean, I guess I'm projecting onto these characters as everyone is, and everyone projecting the paintings as well. But I'm seeing something and then trying to distill that and draw it out. For example, the big painting of Jerry that was in the show, where he's kind of got his hands over his ears, and he's just really like, and that was a really big painting, he's really hunkered down. You know, I was thinking about him being really uncomfortable and like being isolated on this canvas and being like this big solid form. I guess paint as well is what separates it.
I'm thinking about the physicality of the paint and wanting the composition to be something that's weighted down. And yeah, I guess the narrative is the main thing, because I don't want people to need to know what it is when they go in to the gallery, but at the same time I don't want to be like, oh, it's a secret. But I think for the Steve Turn show with Number One Fan, it was one of the only times that I've been quite explicit with what the film is, just because the context of the film was so intrinsic to it. Rupert Pupkin, him like reaching and reaching and getting knocked back, and then Jerry being this big, totally monolithic figure. Those two characters just feed into so much of what my work is about, that it just, to talk about them in the context of the show didn't feel like I was making work about the film, even though I kind of was, just because it all just linked together so magically, you know?
I'm trying to think about your previous shows, and I know that you have obviously taken from films, and that becomes a huge part of it, but is it always, with your solos, is it always exclusively based around a single film?
No, so this is the first time.
Is that like a kind of, okay, I'm just going to test the water, see how it feels? Are you going down a path where you're like, okay, cool, now this next show is going to be on Lord of the Rings?
Well, that would be a good idea.
I don't know.
Well, no, but because I was like, oh, I did really like that, because I do like my shows to be, same with how I like my paintings to be, just like totally, I want it all to fit together and there to be nothing extraneous in there. So to have it be one show and it feels so like organic was amazing. But it also, I think, was a very rare thing. In the past, I've gotten there through kind of, so like my show at Bim Bam, Poor Sap so that started with Raging Bull by Martin Scorsese.
You had quite an iconic image in that one. It was quite the bloodied nose. That was kind of where I was going with that question about the separation, because for that one, you look at it and you go, that's Raging Bull.
Yeah.
That's from Raging Bull. It's an iconic frame. And then with this show, I don't know if it's because it's the backs of the heads more so, or they're not like this shot.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where the separation lies.
Yeah, I think so. Well, that's because obviously the drawings come from shots where there's a feeling I continuously throughout my artistic career have found hard to describe, which is I get this totally physical feeling overcomes me, and I'm like, pause, and then I do all these drawings and whatever. But obviously, iconic shots are iconic because they're so iconic. So a few times I have ended up painting something and people are like, oh, that's literally the shot they use for the poster of like Punch Drunk Love. And I'm like, oh, I just thought it was a good shot.
It was a good shot. It was so good they used it for the poster.
Yeah, I do really love the backs of heads. I feel like a lot of the time they say a lot more to me than faces, weirdly. But the thing with the Raging Bull, I was looking at, which again is a theme in my practice, but I really leaned into it. Characters who are just punish themselves over and over and over. And so I just kind of, like I'm always watching films and I've kind of got this big like archive of shots and stuff, and I'll like hang on to things. I think I had a painting, the first painting that was complete for that show was one from Uncut Gems, which was a drawing that I'd had for like 2 years. I'm
going to ask you about Mr. Adam Sandler later on. We'll cover that. I want to get warmed up first before we go right into the vortex.
Yeah, finally, it's for me to stop rambling and answer your question.
It's okay.
I'm really against being like, this is what I do, this is what I'll do forever. It's like I'm still painting from screenshots. I've no way, I don't feel locked into doing that forever. I painted them all from one show, which was great. But then I also think if I was to go, right, every single show that I do is going to be from one film, then I'm pretty much, I think that would be quite boring, because I would just be like, okay, so what's this one about? What's this one? And then I think I would be just making fan art, which I am kind of.
But highbrow,
yeah. I think it's there's this level of removal to it where it's, you know, it's a screenshot and then it's a drawing and then the painting is from the drawing. You know, the physicality of the paint is so important. So all of those different things come in. I think it might become a bit of a gimmick if I'm like, every show is, you know, from one film.
Oh yes, I love that film. Let's go.
Yeah.
And it becomes about that rather than about you.
Yeah, and I might do really well doing that, but it's...
Well, that's the annoying thing, right? You look at it and you go, "Fuck, this is like a clear path. I can just do this." And
yeah,
I understand the desire to protect that artistic freedom, that creative freedom to not box yourself into something. Talk to me about the physicality of the paint. It's something that you've mentioned there a couple of times, and I just want to maybe just pick up on what you mean by that.
Yeah, sure. So I've always used really thick paint, because like the first painters I was into when I was a teenager was like Francis Bacon and people like that. I just love oil when it's so thick and you can really feel it. And my favourite painter in the world is Philip Guston, which is probably painfully obvious. I just think there's this really magical quality to oil paint where it's able to it's got this living quality to it. Something with my painting is because they are so... I always really resist when people say that they're, you know, illustrative or cartoony, but like they are, especially when they're seen on a screen.
That's the kicker right there. Because you look at it and it looks flat, it looks graphic. And then it's only once you start to see those detailed shots, you really get that texture, that physicality of the paint. You know, you start to see that these are really, you know, they're you know, there's a real borderline sculptural element in there.
Yeah,
know?
For sure. Because how I apply it is like, and it's all through trial and error. So I used to use this impasto medium and then it was out of stock. So I got a different impasto medium that's really like matte and it's weirdly like sandy. So I'll mix all my colors on the palette and then I'll do a first layer and then I'll leave them to dry on there. So I'll keep using them over like a week or so. And I mix so much paint in one go. Like the residency I was on recently, everyone was like, what? Because I just had these massive piles of paint. But it just means it becomes so viscous and has this like skin on it that then I like it when that gets into the paint and then you carve into it. And I think because they are so kind of graphic, it means that I want the planes of colour to be dynamic and it's hard to describe. I just want the oil paint to be the star as well, just like as a material. I think a lot about like cinema screens. So my work's kind of getting bigger and bigger.
You fucking love film, don't you?
Oh, I really do. It's crazy. I think about like, say if you go to the cinema. I'm doing this. It makes sense what I'm about to talk about. You go to this.
We need an audio description. At this point, Hannah places their hand on their nose.
It looks like I'm going like, but I'm not really. If you put your nose like right up to a cinema screen, it would just be like these big abstract, like buzzing, like swathes of color. And I really want to emulate that. And again, like I said, you know, I want my work to be just enough. That's also down to the composition and the drawings. My drawings are very much like kind of line drawings because I think that that's enough for me. And so the paint as well, that brings in that extra quality to it. Yeah, I just want the paint to make it feel like alive, basically.
Do you ever get a chance to like listen and just sort of hear some of the responses in LA and at Steve Turner? Did you do a fly on the wall kind of thing? How did they sort of take it?
Well, it was great because I started working on it and I sent some bits through to Steve and he emailed me and he was like, you know, that is one of my favorite films of all time. He was really excited. So that was great because I was like, you know, I've chosen this film that is like, right now it's actually, why I watched it, it's having a bit of a resurgence, but it was a flop when it came out. Flop of the year, Martin Scorsese always says. But it was Yeah,
Which is hard to imagine with the names De Niro and Scorsese, right?
I know. Yeah, but so it was great. So Steve Turner was really excited about it, which kind of like buoyed me. And then we went to. So me and my partner went out to LA, and we'd never been to the States before, either of us. So that was crazy. But we went to an event the night before the opening, and it was this reading. It was really great. We were sat next to this woman, and we started talking to her, and she was like, that painting over there looks kind of like Robert De Niro. And I was like, well, you're not going to believe this.
Brace yourself,
Yeah,
darling.
I was like, it is? And then she was like, huh, I went to college with Marty. And I was like, okay, great. I'm in LA.
I'm in LA.
Yeah.
I've arrived.
So that was a great interaction. But everyone was really positive, which was great. And a lot of people did say, it's perfect for LA because it's like these, these big movie stars on the wall and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. But I always feel like a bit of an alien in those environments. So I was having all these really great conversations, and then you come away and then you're like, I can't remember any of what just happened.
When you say those environments, do you mean openings or just America in general?
Openings mainly, America a little bit, just because we arrived in the evening to LAX and we were like, I don't know what everyone's saying. This is just fine. This is just the same as anywhere. And we got out the next day and we were like, it's crazy. So that was probably an added element, but just, yeah, openings in general, I just get a bit like,
Must have been a cool feeling being invited out, sitting on that plane, flying to LAX for your first LA show.
Yeah, it was amazing. I had a brilliant time, and it felt very, very surreal. But yeah, everyone was so welcoming, and yeah, we did so much in LA. We were like, we just need to squeeze all the juice out of it that we can. Ate so much food.
And back to Glasgow.
Yeah, back to Glasgow, which it was sunny for the first time yesterday, on July 24th. But yeah, it's grey again today.
I'm going to stay in the show. I have a thousand questions I want to ask you about Glasgow. Talk about, and you briefly mentioned, and I know that most people that are doing interviews with you will bring this up, the framing of the characters is usually not us. It's not always with the backs of the heads to us, largely with the backs of the heads to us, or dramatically looking up or down, but never sort of Renaissance directly at us. What is it that attracts you so much about those particular angles? I think it's like, to answer really obviously, I just find it a lot more interesting. There's just something about, I think it's interesting because characters, or not even characters, but figures in a painting resisting being viewed, like not wanting to be seen, I enjoy, because it's kind of like, I say the opposite, but it's something that, among lots of people are kind of doing this a lot more now. So it's becoming a bit more of the norm, but just these figures resisting being viewed. I do paint faces every so often, but I think that you can, painting the back of a head or just like the side of a face, you're forced to interrogate something more, just because if you're looking at an expression, you can kind of go, oh, that person's happy, that person's sad, whatever. For anything, your brain will kind of make the link. But if you're seeing something that's instantly recognizable, you're quicker to kind of walk away. I guess kind of just, I love film, I love painting. Talking about Francis Bacon again. Like Francis Bacon, like he paints figures, but the faces are always like all over the place. And I also think I get lost more in the physical act of painting and, how I'm applying the paint and things like that. So my favorite thing to paint is the back of a head. Which is like the hardest possible angle to make appealing for people, right? Yeah, but it's kind of like when I'm making stuff, I will do layers, like I say, but then I'll build it up so that I've got this kind of texture, and then at the last
the last day is like the fun day where I just kind of like riff.
The treat.
Yeah, the treat. And I kind of like, it's like jazz. I'm just kind of like, I work from drawings. I should probably pay more attention to like where shadow is supposed to go and things like that, but I don't really. So like the last day of painting the back of a head, I'm carving in all these lines. I'm like throwing in like bits of, whatever hair color, brown, yellow, black, here or there, just kind of really instinctively. So there's kind of like, I'm very much a figurative painter. I've always been a figurative painter. Maybe I would stop being a figurative painter one day.
You got to go through your Gustin abstract period,
I know.
right?
It feels like a chance to be abstract and to be intuitive, which I can be with the rest, but with the back of a head, it's really like, it's just colour and shape and colour or whatever. So I love that. When you're not looking at a face, you're thinking about the shape of a body, and all of that is so important in a way that, and maybe this is a me issue. If I'm doing a face, then maybe I'll just kind of like, okay, the face is the focal point. I'll put the body in, but it will kind of, it will just be to go with the face and just to fill out the rest of it. Whereas I have to think really hard about composition from a drawing, because I always scale up by hand, so I'll just kind of have the painting and then I'll have the canvas and just map it out. So then the painting becomes its own thing as well. So I just enjoy it, basically. Yeah, I like to be thwacked back by an image, so.
In one of the interviews I'd read, and it was from quite some time ago, that it said that you were really fast at painting, and a painting at that point would take no more than a day. What's the current time frame for a painting?
So that interview was when I had just finished art school, and I was painting in a day.
Oh, you knew which one it was.
Yeah, I know. That's like the only other interview with me that exists.
It's from 2018, which did not help the research for this in a great way.
Okay, so that was 2 years after I'd finished at Goldsmiths. So I was painting in a day, which started out as on my course, I was really trying to get a loose style of painting. So I would give myself like 10 minutes to do a painting, and then I'd make it 15 minutes, and I'd make it half an hour, which was really great, and meant that when I was painting, I was like really attacking it. And then it kind of developed this style, and then I was like, okay, I know how to do that now, so I'll just paint. So I did do that for a long time because it worked for me. And then also, living in London, I was working full time. My studio was my bedroom. I'd realistically have 1 day a week to work on a painting. So I'd be like, right, if I paint it in a day, then it means it's done. But that also means if you do a painting and then it's shit, you're like, great, I'm a terrible artist and everything's going to be terrible forever. So it's not a great system. It was when I started on my master's at Glasgow School of Art, because the whole idea is, what I wanted from a master's was to like turn my practice upside down. And I was like, actually, like doing a painting in a day, it's a great thing to say, and that to be something that you say that you do, like similar to like, I was about to say it's a bit gimmicky, then I was about to talk about Alex Katz. I'm not saying Alex Katz is gimmicky. Great guy, goes for a run every morning. I watched an interview with, I love him, he's great. He watched it. I hope he's not done anything terrible recently. Anyway, I
love that that's your first thought. Fuck, I hope he's not a nonce.
Yeah, I really hope so. Love his work. I don't know about his personality. Can't comment on that. But he said...
That's so 2024.
I know. So he does a painting in a day. It takes painting for him a few hours. And I was like, great, I'll be just like Alex Katz. That's what I'll do. And then I was like, actually, by doing that, the paintings that I was making were flat. I always want my paintings to have like a bit of messiness to them, but it has to be... There's a difference between a painting being messy and it being like intentional style or like considered, or it just being messy because you can tell that like you couldn't be bothered.
It was tried to be done in a day.
Yeah, which was where I was at, and I was like, okay, this needs to change. And then just having more time to work on stuff, I then spent more time with paintings, and I've kind of come to this balance where it's like, why is that floating there?
What the fuck is that? What the fuck was that? Apparently Zoom likes this comment.
Thanks, Zoom.
That was so weird.
Wow, I'm scared now. Maybe they did like a background check on Alex Katz and was like, you're in the clear.
He's listening.
Yeah, he's great. Found through trial and error, leaving the paint on the palette will then kind of make it have this quality. And then also I've kind of found that I do still paint really fast, but I've found that, so the impasto medium I use is also quick drying. So I'll kind of do a layer and then by the next day it'll be pretty much touch dry, so I can work over it, because I love to work wet on wet, but also in order to layer it and have it not be muddy, it needs to be a certain level of dry. But I'll work really fast, but I'll just like attack painting for like a few hours and then I'll leave it, and the next day I'll come back.
I like that choice of word.
Yeah.
Attack. Is that how it feels?
Pretty much, yeah, because I'm just like, if you can't, this is a podcast, I'm just waving my arm around. It's an imaginary brush. But the energy is something that, because I do think like, there's a lot of energy in it. To see my paintings in person, they are very like still. They're not particularly like dynamic in that sense, I guess. They're not figures in motion. They're often very fixed. So the energy more just comes out in the application of paint, I suppose.
Nice, that was good.
Yeah.
They're definitely still dynamic, but I understand what you mean about that. First time I saw your painting, it was I think it was in Miami. That stillness and that frame absolutely stood out and grabbed me in that moment, and it didn't require the motion, or it didn't require any. In that interview that I kind of touched on earlier, at that point you were showing in a hospital. You had shown built work for an exhibition in a hospital, and I know that this is, you're in a completely different place now, but I'm interested in that idea of looking back where you were showing in a hospital and it was kind of like early stages for you, and what you feel about having your art seen now to a not completely, but predominantly art-informed audience, right? The audience that goes to a gallery is completely different to the ones that will be seen in a hospital. Original background and interest was in public art, street art, and I like that idea of kind of breaking down the barriers of art and making it more accessible for people. And I think like just thinking about a hospital in that context, I think it's such a great space for art to exist. And I wonder how you feel looking back on that now as the audience has changed and as you've become developed into this exhibiting artist in LA and Miami and wherever art fairs around the world, how you feel about that change and that access point for your art.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's kind of something that it's taken a long time, but also obviously the artists will feel the same, like they feel like they're still just making the work that they need to make. So that I really enjoyed doing that. So it was at MK, Milton Keynes Hospital, which is where I'm from. And I did a few it was MK Arts for Health, so I did a few workshops with them and stuff like that. And there's like this corridor in the hospital, and they were like, "Oh, you can have a show along there." So it was just along this corridor. And my mum was working at MK Hospital at the time, Nepo baby.
That's the best use of Nepo baby I've ever heard. Take that, Brooklyn Beckham.
Take that. But yeah, it was great because that was literally just probably in the year after I'd finished, and at the time I was painting women from my imagination, and they all had like these weird like noses, which I'd like done in a drawing once, and I was like, I love this weird nose, and they just all had that nose for like 4 years, and they were quite inoffensive apart from their weird noses. The specific corridor that they were on was where people would be wheeled down to go into surgery.
So the last thing that they see before they go under is a fucking mental nose.
I know. And it was funny because I kind of heard back from the people, and some people were like, I love it. Other people were like, this is horrible, call this art, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Which I think is great, because that is also...
There's a rawness to that audience, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the art-informed audience just becomes more cautious or diluted or reserved.
Yeah, because like informed, in quotes, audience is still thinking the same thing. It's just they've got a filter, you know. But it's also... So that was great, but it's also, you know, I'm conscious of the first art I saw was, you know, public access galleries and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, whether it's like, you know, the Tate or like the National Gallery or whatever, it's the same thing. Like, you know, it's free to go to. You can go and think that something's shit, or you can think it's great, and you're like totally right in your opinion and whatever you think.
For the American audience, yeah, that's right. Free to go to.
Yeah.
Free to go to.
Hopefully we'll still be free to go to by the time this podcast airs. Eyes on you, Keir Starmer.
Quick pop.
Yeah. I do think about it. It feels like amazing to have all these opportunities and to be... I've always been making art like my whole life, as long as I can remember, and I always will be making art, but it's obviously different, and it feels good to be making something for something, just as a bit of like a, you know, kick up the arse to like get stuff done, and to, you know, just have the opportunity to experiment and have your work be seen. I do think about how the audience is different, but I can't let myself think about it too much, because I'm at the point where I'm making art so that it is more like digestible or like more likely to be popular or something like that. Then there's no point in making it anymore. Yeah, so I don't really know what my answer is. I think I'm mostly just grateful for these opportunities, and I'm aware that my work has more eyes on it, but I'm just trying not to let that, you know, impact how the work goes, I suppose.
That's a good way of getting there. At that point, the work was women. It was women in bathing suits for most of it. Women in swimsuits.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the last couple of shows, it's largely men.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you go all or nothing in one?
Yeah.
And why can't the two coexist together in spaces?
Mm-hmm.
Or can they?
They could. It's, I think it was so... The women in bathing suits, so that started in like late 2014, 2015, when like David Hockney was having a real moment. I think it was because that film A Bigger Splash came out, and then everyone was kind of talking about, and I got really into David Hockney. So weirdly at that time I was thinking a lot about LA, but I was thinking a lot about pools. So I was doing lots of paintings of pools, which then the figures then had swimming costumes on. Like I said, after finishing art school, I was quite limited in the time I had to make. I was then playing it quite safe, because you feel like I've got one day a week to make something, so I need to make something that I know will work and that I'll like. The idea initially with the swimming costumes was the context of the swimming pool, but also like I was very into like the body. So I was like, you know, I want it to just be the figures and the shape of the figure, and I was trying to like find this physicality, which is what I'm still looking for in my work, but it was in its early stages. So I was like, if they're in swimming costumes, then there's no distraction of like clothes. But I think if I was being honest with myself, I was like, actually, I'm a bit scared to paint clothes, and I don't know what I should, because they're all from my imagination. I was like, what do I make them wear? Like, what should they be doing? So I had this place where I felt safe making. They were of women. I think just a lot of the painters I was looking at, so like Chantal Joff and Alice Neal and people like that, was sort of figurative paintings of women. And I enjoyed doing that. And I was always didn't have an interest in painting men at that point. And it only came around when I was on my MFA and I started painting from screenshots, which was because, so it was COVID. I started my MFA in September 2020. So we had one day in the studio a week, and then it became no days in the studio. So initially with that one day, I was like, I need to do something. So it was like just how it was before, but I was in the studio, and then one day I couldn't think of something to do. So I was like, oh, I'll just paint a screenshot from The Favourite.
Dearest Queen, you are mad. giving me a palace. It is a monstrous extravagance, Mrs. Morley. We are at war. We won. Oh, it is not over. We must continue. Oh, I did not know that.
So I did that, and there was this big, like, it was Olivia Colman and like this, her big sleeve on like her face, but it was a bit cut off. And I was like, I just did it on a whim, and I was like, oh my God, I loved doing that. And I got the physicality I was looking for from this sleeve. It became something entirely different. And then the studio was closed, so me and my friend Rosie, we were living together and we were both on the course, so we turned the living room into a studio. So we had all this freedom to make work. I've always been someone that goes to galleries all the time, is always looking at stuff, but couldn't. So I was then just watching films like every day. So films kind of became the galleries and became the context. The films that I love have always been ones with like these sad men in them, or like men who are just like, everything's terrible, and it's like, maybe it doesn't need to be terrible, like maybe it's not that terrible, like maybe you're the issue. And so I was interested in that, and the more drawings that I was doing, I was like, okay, this is something. Whereas, I had some paintings which were of female figures, but I was kind of thinking, I'm enjoying this, but it feels more like doing a painting rather than doing a painting and feeding on something or drawing from something. Because this was around the time that I was, beginning to think more about, my gender and realizing, I think I'm trans masc, all that sort of thing. And I was like, actually, maybe the sad guy who is terrible at figuring stuff out is actually me, and that's what I'm doing.
How much do you think these films and these characters did help influence your understanding of masculinity and what that means?
I think quite a lot, but I think but I think it's the same as anything. Like, people will watch stuff and then they will relate to it because they see themselves in those characters. And then I think maybe the more I was kind of figuring out who I was, I would then make those connections, even if it's like, this person in the film is flailing, they are like, I wouldn't go to the lengths that Rupert Pupkin would in The King of Comedy to like secure an artistic career. I've still got that same desperation, I just handle it better. So it's just kind of seeing like what could be if your base instincts or if how you are was like left to fester and become an extreme, which I think that is something in my paintings so Adam Sandler, his characters, he's always like, he can be quite a chill guy, and there'll suddenly be a point in every film he's in where he's like, just like screams. Which is one of the things that I'm interested in with him, because it's like, everything's fine, and then suddenly it just breaks open.
Did you have a break open moment? And I'm talking about this idea of, you kind of coming to terms with your own gender and reevaluating things. Did you have an Adam Sandler moment? Was it a catalyst, or was it a gradual understanding or learning?
I think it was pretty gradual. I think, like, this is maybe lame to say, but maybe like painting is the breaking open, like, because Punch Drunk Love, so that Adam Sandler film by Paul Thomas Anderson, that was a big catalyst for my practice. And that's probably the film I've done the most paintings from, where he's in like his blue suit. And in that film, his character is so like in Arrested Development, I guess. He's just like...
What's that? We used to call you gay boy, remember? You'd be fine, and then we call you gay boy, you just freak out.
He's this man, but he's this boy in this suit which protects him from the world.
I called you gay boy, and you got so mad. Are you gay now?
And then he'll fly off the handle. But there's this weird kind of like tenderness to him, because he's just like this little boy.
I wanted to ask you something because you're a doctor, right?
Yeah.
I don't like myself sometimes. Can you help me?
Mary, I'm a dentist.
The painting from that kind of felt like I was releasing something. And my degree show for the MFA, I did like a series of paintings. I did 3 paintings of him from that film, and then I had a big one of Daniel Day-Lewis in Phantom Thread. He's like the opposite end of the spectrum, because he's just that he does also go fuck. So he has his own breaking open in his own way.
Mrs. Vaughan is satisfied with the dress.
No one gives a tinker's fucking curse about Mrs. Vaughan's satisfaction.
But I think painting is a healthy channel for me to flip out, I guess.
Do you still allow yourself for it to be that healthy channel whilst still being the source of your income, while being the job that you have to do? You know, that battle between those two.
I suppose so, but I do also work part-time. So that gives me, there is a factor of that, because, you know, it's hard to make a living as an artist.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I've done interviews with people before where they just won't say things like that. The reality of being an artist is that it's not all rosy, and even if you're showing in shows around the world, there's still pressures, and especially in Britain at the moment, everything's so hard. And I think that within this environment, and I'm as guilty of it as anyone else, you know, we perpetuate these images, these ideas of what this life is and what we're doing, and the successful artist and all these things. But the reality is actually it's not always that pretty. It's really easy for us to just have interviews with people that have studio assistants and all these things, and they're doing these collabs, and it's like, okay, cool, but where's the middle ground?
Yeah, no, for sure, which I think is also why it feels so, I can use the word pertinent, who am I? It feels so pertinent to me that my work has to, like, I have to make it for me, because the fact is it is in no way the main source of my income. And so if I'm not making the work that I want to make, why am I even doing it? And it doesn't feel like I'm compromising anything by the works acting as a release, because it just means that they feel urgent to make. Because that's a word that I think about a lot when I'm making, like, it has to feel urgent. It has to feel like something that I have to make, which is also a difficulty when selecting images, because, you know, it isn't something that I can just choose. It's something that an image jumps out at me. Like a few years ago, I was like, God, I really need to make some paintings, but I don't have any, nothing's pushed me. And I was like, oh, I know, I'll watch Yorgos Lanthimos's The Lobster. That'll sort me right out.
What happened?
She jumped from the window of room 180. There's blood and biscuits everywhere.
I hope she dies right away. On second thoughts, I hope she suffers quite a bit before she dies. I just hope her pathetic screams can't be heard from my room, because I was thinking about having a lie down, and I need peace and quiet. I was playing golf and I'm quite tired. The last thing I need is some woman dying slowly and loudly.
And I watched it, and actually there was nothing. And I actually that film was really stressful. And then I just had a shit afternoon, because I was like, great.
Is that because the art's already in it?
Yeah, probably. I was just, spent the rest of the day thinking about someone putting my hand in a toaster. I like that as well, that it isn't something that I can make happen. Because I also think if I think I'm going to make this painting and it's going to look like this, and then I make it and then it looks like that, I'm just like, why have I done it? I could have just thought about it and learned everything that I needed to learn.
What did you learn from the MFA?
I actually, we were very down on the MFA at the time, because GSA has got a bit of a reputation at the moment for just being a bit like messing people around, which they did with us undoubtedly with the pandemic. It could have been handled a lot better.
I think there's a blanket, you can throw that into just about any institution.
Exactly. I think, institutions are just the issue.
They're not exactly known for being nimble and adaptive in certain situations, you know, especially one as old as GSA. Not to suddenly be like, I'm an advocate for Glasgow School of Art, but just in general, institutions aren't built to handle that stuff.
No, for sure. But yeah, exactly, because like the more time I spend out of GSA, I'm like, actually, I did learn a lot. So like the time that I spent there, I really threw myself into it, and I was like, I've got 2 years where I'm just going to be making, and that's it. So I'm just going to make loads of stuff, and there'll be loads of stuff that doesn't work, which is another thing in my practice that is so important. Like, I have to make stuff that's shit, otherwise I'm never going to cast it out. I'm like very pro making something, not liking it, casting it away. So there was lots of that. Something would feel good, and then I would take another step in that direction, take another step. I was lucky that in my cohort I had some really great friends, and we all really cared about art. We had very different practices, but we all were having discussions. It was annoying at the time, but at GSA, but also I just don't know anything. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do an MFA. I won't have to write a dissertation because it's an art one. And then they were like, oh yeah, you have to write a dissertation. And I was like, what are you talking about?
You've got to justify your work.
Yeah, I would just, so that's my fault. But we had to evaluate our own work at the end of every
semester.
Yeah, semester, that's it. And actually I learned so much through having to do that. And I still like look back at the things that I wrote. I think I just learned how to kind of interrogate myself a bit more, and I feel like I'm not great at talking about my work, but I think it's because it's my work, so I feel like what I'm saying is obvious, but also it's just because I've been thinking it, you know, so it's not new to me.
Well, and the work that's its job.
Yeah, of course.
It's our job to do the interpretation and the evaluation and the kind of the critics and the audience, and the rest everyone else's job. That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
How do you interpret this work? What do you see when you see this? Because I've done the talking through my pain, but it doesn't work like that, does it?
No, not quite. It's I think we as artists need to be able to talk about our work, because also I need to be able to have discussions around it, because I made it. I should know what's going on with it. It just sometimes takes me to look back at something like a couple of months down the line, and I'm like, that's what that was about. You know, it's just like a bit of a delay with it.
You know, you're out of school now. You're still in Glasgow. It's kept you for some reason.
I like it.
Know, fly the flag. Tell me how great Glasgow is.
No, I love Glasgow. No, there's just a solid art community here. Like, I was on a residency for all of June. So I was in Norwich, but there was Glasgow International in June, which I was gutted to miss. There was loads of great stuff. But it's the same as anywhere. You leave art school and you're like, okay, we're all going to continue these discussions about your work and all that sort of thing. But in the reality of the day-to-day, it is hard to keep those conversations going. But I've still got people around that those conversations are, you know, open for me if I was to seek them out. Shows going on, lots of people. There's a strong community of people here that make work and like care about work. So that's great to feel like you're a part of something like that. Also, Glasgow Film Theatre, best cinema in the world, doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Which is a bigger passion then, film or painting?
Painting is the thing that I've always known that I've wanted to do. If I was to stop painting, I would feel adrift. But film is, I've always loved film, so it's great that they can come together in this way. You know, it feels like it makes sense because they're similar mediums. Like I do tend to have obsessions. So like currently I'm in a Martin Scorsese obsession, and I was reading a lot about him filming King of Comedy. It was funny because all of his films are really, fluid. They move around all the time. But The King of Comedy, he was just recovering from illness. So he filmed it all sitting down, which is why the film is so still and so different, because he wasn't marching around. So he had to really think about composition. He's really precise and there's nothing spare in there, which it feels like how I am when I'm approaching painting.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your honesty and your insight, and for making time to do this with me. I really appreciate that. There you go. That was Hannah Wilson here in Radio Juxtapoz. I hope some of you were able to take something away from that conversation. I always love hearing from someone with a deep passion about a subject like cinema. Always encourages me to go out and watch films I might have missed, or rewatched ones that I've already seen with a set of fresh eyes. We'll be back with you all real soon, so till that moment comes, as always, take care of yourselves and each other.